Welcome, guys, to another midnight story. But tonight is not like the others. You shouldn't have come here. The shadows are watching your every step. The wind whispers secrets you were never meant to hear. Every creak, every rustle could be your last dot. Do you feel it? The darkness moving just behind you. Welcome to the Midnight Story.
Story 1. The gas station that wasn't there. I was coming back from a job out in Bartow, some miserable HVAC call that kept me out past sunset. By the time I got back on Route 33, the sun had dipped behind the ridges and the sky had gone that sickly blue-grey that always makes the mountains look taller than they are. The rain had stopped an hour earlier, but mist still clung low to the asphalt, moving like it had somewhere to be. I hadn't passed a single car in over 45 minutes, and my gaslight blinked on just as I rounded a bend where the trees thickened and leaned too close to the road. I wasn't exactly panicking, but I was getting there. My phone had no service, not even enough to send a message. And Route 33 ain't the kind of road you want to be stranded on past midnight. Steep drop-offs, no guardrails and spots, and nothing but forest for miles. I'd been hoping to make it to Elkins, but the gauge was dropping quicker than I liked. That's when I saw the glow through the mist. It was faint at first, just a dull red shimmer tucked into the trees. I thought it might have been someone's porch light or even brake lights from a parked car, but as I got closer it took shape. A small gas station, single canopy, 2 old-style pumps, the kind with the mechanical dials and a hose that looked like it belonged on a lawnmower. The building behind it was squat, cinder block, and covered in a faded red sign with a single working light buzzing over it. The letters weren't all lit. All I could make out was oil and what looked like the edge of a K. I pulled in without thinking. There was a metallic ding as I crossed the pressure hose like something from the 1970s. The whole place looked out of time, like it had been preserved under glass. No card reader, no intercom, just the pump and the faint smell of something between motor oil and wet leaves. A man stepped out from the side of the building, slow and stiff like he'd been sitting too long. He wore a dark jumpsuit, the kind mechanics used to wear, and one of those old mesh trucker hats with a logo too faded to read. He didn't say anything. I just walked to the pump, took the nozzle and started filling my tank. I tried to make small talk, asked if this was a family station or if it had always been here, but he didn't answer, just kept staring off into the woods that circled the station like a wall. His hands were clean, I noticed, but his face had a sheen of sweat that glistened even in the weak red light. When the pump clicked, he nodded once. I got out, handed him a 20, and he reached into a pocket and handed me a receipt. Thin, thermal paper, the kind that curls after a few hours. No logo, no address, just the amount, the date, and the word cash typed in faded grey. I asked him if the road ahead was clear. He looked at me like I'd spoken in another language. Then he turned and walked back inside the building without a word. I stood there for a second, the mist curling around my legs, listening. No bugs, no wind, not even the hum of a refrigeration unit. Just silence. I got back in my truck and pulled out. As I left, the red light flickered once, then died behind me in the fog. By the time I made it to Elkins, I was convinced I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a private station, maybe a farmer with a side hustle, though I didn't see any homes around. But when I passed that same stretch of road 2 days later, the place wasn't there. I slowed down, thinking I'd missed it. Doubled back twice, nothing, no drive, no canopy, just trees, dense and unbroken. I even parked on the shoulder and walked through the undergrowth where I thought the entrance had been. All I found were rotted fence posts and bits of rusted chain link buried in the leaves. No tracks, no tire marks, nothing but damp brush and a busted milk crate full of acorns. I thought maybe I'd gotten turned around, confused, but I checked my GPS history. It showed a slowdown at the exact spot where I'd pulled in. No name, just a dot. That night, I dug out the receipt. It was still in my glove box, curled like a dead leaf. The ink had already started to fade, even though it was only 2 days old. I held it up to the light, trying to read the time. 12:04 a.m., the last visible part before the paper turned ghost white. I took it to a buddy of mine who works dispatch for the county, asked him if he knew of any old stations out that way. He pulled out an old property record book and said there used to be a place called Knox Oil that went under in the late 80s. Fire took most of it. Said the guy who owned it died in the woods a few years after, froze to death or something like that. Didn't give a lot of details, just flipped the page and said, nothing out there now. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about how quiet it was, how that man stared into the trees like he was waiting for something, and how the bell had rung when I pulled in, but not when I left. It's been a year now. I still have the receipt, though there's nothing left on it but the faint impression of the numbers, pressed into the paper like a scar. Sometimes when I'm driving alone and I hit a stretch of fog, I find myself slowing down, scanning the trees for a red light in the mist. And sometimes late at night, I hear that same metallic ding in my dreams. Just once, sharp and clear, like someone's pulling in, or worse, like something never left. Story 2, mile marker 237 disappears at night. I was hauling a busted water heater down toward Charleston for a buddy of mine late on a Tuesday night in early March. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, just seeps, slow and soaking like the road itself had a memory of snow. I'd finished the job late and didn't want to spring for a motel, so I figured I'd knock the drive out in one go. Route 119, long and winding through backcountry where the trees don't bother moving out of the way. I'd made that drive more times than I could count, knew every dip, every blind curve. But that night, something shifted. It started subtly. I passed mile marker 235, green sign, dinged up corner, right where it always was. Then maybe 10 minutes later, I saw 234. It made sense. But then I passed 237. At first, I figured I'd missed a few in between. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, maybe I'd zoned out. But then 235 again. I knew it was the same one because of the bullet hole clean through the top right corner. I'd noticed it a dozen times before. Now, I ain't the kind to panic over weird signs or road quirks. West Virginia's full of odd corners, roads that fold back on themselves, places GPS don't even bother tracking. But this felt different. The fog had started rolling in around then, thick and low, swirling like it was dragging something behind it. I turned the defrost up. My GPS screen froze just past a turnoff near a place called Stump Hollow, just locked in place, the arrow pointing forward no matter what turn I made. Another 10 minutes passed, and I saw that same busted guardrail I'd passed earlier. I slowed down and pulled off onto a gravel patch. Got out. I walked to the edge, thinking maybe I was imagining things. But there it was, the same rusted rail with a bent post wrapped in caution tape that had long since lost its yellow. Below it, just woods. Too steep to climb, too quiet to feel right. That's when I noticed the road itself looked wrong. Not wrong like potholes or bad paint. Wrong like it hadn't been paved since the 60s. The lines were faded to the point of being guessed, and the tar had that cracked mosaic look, like the skin of something old and dry. I reached down, ran a hand across it. Cold and brittle. Not like fresh pavement at all. The trees lining it felt too close, too uniform, like they'd grown up to a line and stopped watching. I got back in the truck and tried to turn around. Steering was fine, but as soon as I backed up, the rear tires locked. Not like I hit the brakes. Locked. Dead weight. I stepped out again and checked. Nothing under them, no rocks, no drop, just gravel. But they wouldn't move. I tried rocking it, tried revving it gently, then hard. Nothing. just a hollow sound from the engine, like it was struggling to remember how to run. There were no other cars. No headlights in either direction. I honked once, mostly out of habit. The sound felt like it barely left the cab, deadened, like the fog swallowed it before it could echo. I sat there for what felt like hours. No radio, no signal, just mist crawling across the windshield in slow streaks. I kept watching the side mirror, thinking I'd see lights, something, anything. Instead, I caught a glimpse of movement in the fog, off to the tree line. Just a quick shape. Thought maybe a deer. But it didn't move like a deer. It stood still. Too still. I remember checking the time. It was 2:13 a.m. I remember because I kept staring at the numbers, waiting for them to change, and they didn't. The clock didn't tick forward. The second I noticed that, I swear the fog got thicker, like it knew I'd caught on. I started talking out loud just to hear my own voice. Said my name, where I was going. They said the names of old teachers, favorite songs. Anything to anchor myself. But the air inside the truck felt heavy, like being underwater. Every breath tasted like copper and mold. When the fog finally started to thin, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like something losing interest, like whatever was watching had gotten bored. The light didn't come all at once. It just sort of seeped in, pale and cold. The trees faded back to green. The road looked like itself again, and when I tried the gas, the tires rolled like nothing had ever been wrong. I didn't stop again. I didn't check the mirror. I just drove, knuckling white, until the sun came up properly and I saw signs for Charleston. I didn't take the heater to my buddy's place. I left it at a truck stop off the main drag, texted him that it'd be there waiting, never said why. 2 weeks later, I drove that same stretch during the day. I brought a friend with me, told him I just wanted to test something. The mile markers were all in order, 233, 234, 235, no jumps, no repeats, and the road? Smooth, newly paved in fact, not a crack to be seen. The guardrail was still there, but the tape was gone. The bend in the metal was still familiar, but it didn't feel the same, like looking at a photo of a place you swear you've been, but can't explain when or how. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd gotten out and walked into those woods, or if I'd stayed still a little longer. I don't think I was supposed to be there at that hour. I think some places along those old roads still remember how they used to be, before the maps, before the paving crews, and maybe, every now and then, they pull back to that time, to whatever was here before us. I don't take night drives anymore, not alone, not on back roads, and if I see fog rising out of a hollow past midnight, I turn around. I don't care what it costs me in time or gas, because I've come to believe some roads don't lead anywhere. They just loop, waiting, and all it takes is one moment of forgetfulness. One long blink, and you're not just lost. You've been forgotten. Story 3. The Woman on Old Hatcher Road. It was late October, and I was cutting across Old Hatcher Road just to shave a few miles off the drive back from Fayetteville. Folks around there don't like that road much. It's narrow, patchy. The shoulder drops off hard, and trees lean in like they're listening. I never paid it much mind, just figured it was a back road like any other. That night, though, it felt heavier. The clouds sat low, moonlight barely making it through, and the fog rolled in early. I had the heat on low, music low enough to let my thoughts wander. Nothing in particular was on my mind. Just the hum of the tires and the occasional crackle of wet leaves. I saw her around the third switchback. She was standing by the rusted guardrail, arms folded, barefoot, her white dress almost glowing in the headlights. I slowed down without thinking. Didn't hit the brakes hard, just eased up like something inside me had already decided. There were no houses nearby, no other cars, not even a trail I could see, just her, quiet and still. She didn't wave, didn't flag me down, just looked at the car like she expected me. Her hair hung long and flat, soaked through at the ends. She didn't look scared, more tired. I rolled the window down, leaned across the seat. "You all right?" I asked. She tilted her head a little. "I'm just trying to get home," she said. Her voice was soft, barely above the sound of the engine. But I can't remember which way. "Where's home?" I asked, glancing back down the road behind me. Nothing but mist and trees. "I don't know anymore." Something in me hesitated, but I reached over and unlocked the door. "I can give you a ride into town, figure it out from there." She smiled, almost sadly, and slid into the passenger seat. As soon as she did, I felt it. The temperature dropped, like someone opened a freezer door. My breath fogged the windshield, even though the heater was still going. I looked at her hands, folded neatly in her lap, and noticed her nails were clean, but her palms looked like they'd been scraped. Dirt and dried blood caked around the edges. She didn't say anything for a few minutes. We rode in silence, the tires crunching on gravel patches where the pavement had long since eroded. I kept sneaking glances at her, trying to make sense of it. She didn't shiver, just stared straight ahead like she was listening for something. Then she spoke. "Do you believe in liminal places?" I frowned. "What, like in-between spaces?" She nodded slowly. "Places that don't belong. Not quite here, not quite gone." "Sure," I said, not sure at all. "Like thresholds, doorways, old roads," she added. "Once people forget." Something about the way she said it made my stomach knot. I tried to keep my tone light. "Are you a philosophy student or something?" She turned to me then, and her eyes looked glassy, like she hadn't blinked in a long time. "Have you ever lost time?" I didn't answer at first. My mouth went dry. "You mean like blacking out? Like driving on a familiar road and suddenly realizing you don't know where you are, but somehow you've always been there?" I didn't know what to say. I looked away, just for a second. Watched the trees flicker past through the fog. Watched the lines on the road blur. When I looked back, she was gone. Seat still indented. The seatbelt still buckled. But no door sound, no draft, nothing. I slammed the brakes, threw the car in park. My heart was hammering so loud I thought I'd be sick. I opened the passenger door and stepped out, scanning the roadside. "Hello?" I called. "Hey!" The fog swallowed my voice. I walked the stretch of road back and forth, maybe 50 yards each way, calling for her, listening for the sound of feet or movement in the brush. Nothing, no trail, no footprints, just wet leaves and the smell of rain on old pavement. Eventually, I gave up. Got back in the car and sat with the engine idling, hands shaking against the wheel. The seatbelt on the passenger side was still stretched across, locked in place. I reached over and unbuckled it. It snapped back into position too fast, like it had weight behind it. But there was nothing there. I didn't sleep when I got home. I just sat at the kitchen table and stared at my phone. I didn't even know what I was searching for. Just typed in "missing woman Old Hatcher Road" and scrolled through page after page of forgotten cases. I found her on the third page. Evelyn Hart. Disappeared in 1984. Last seen walking along Old Hatcher Road after a fight with her boyfriend. Said she was going home. She never made it. They found her shoes by the river, but no body. No answers. Just a face frozen in time. Faint smile, long hair, same white dress. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? That I picked up a woman who vanished before I was born? That she asked about places between places? I've avoided that road since, even when it had saved me time. Something about it feels like an open wound, still healing, or maybe never meant to. But sometimes, late at night, I think I hear her. That soft voice just behind the hum of the engine, asking me if I've ever lost time, and lately, I think maybe I have. Story 4. The Logging Truck with No Driver. It was late November, just after the first real cold snap, and I was heading down the switchbacks near Boone, hauling a generator in the back of my pickup for a guy who lived off one of those old forest roads. You know the ones. Unpaved, mostly forgotten, with names nobody uses anymore except for the folks born into them. I'd made the trip before, but never this late in the season. The trees had already dropped their leaves and the bare branches looked like crooked hands trying to claw something back from the grey sky. The sun was gone behind the ridge when I started my descent. The road curled down like a corkscrew, no guardrails. Just sheer drop-offs that disappeared into a mess of black pine and laurel. I'd only gone a mile or two when I caught up to a logging truck ahead of me. It looked ancient, metal scraped bare, taillights flickering like candle flames, chains jangling loud enough I felt them in my teeth. It was crawling, 10, maybe 15 miles an hour, and I was stuck behind it with no way around. Not on a road like that, not with a drop that could swallow a whole semi. I figured I'd ride it out, let the old guy take his time, but something didn't feel right. The trailer was fully loaded, big, freshly cut logs still oozing sap, but I couldn't see the cab. I thought maybe the angle of the turns was playing tricks on me, or the fog in the hollows was messing with my eyes. I slowed a little more, leaned over the wheel, trying to get a clear view through the mist and the pine needles stuck to the windshield. That's when it hit me. There wasn't a cab, just the trailer. A full load of timber moving on its own, coasting, weaving like it knew the road. At first I laughed, just one of those nervous huffs, like when your brain doesn't know how else to react. Maybe the cab disconnected ahead and I couldn't see it through the fog. Maybe there was some kind of push mechanism I didn't know about. Maybe I was tired, but it kept going. Curve after curve, the trailer stayed just ahead of me, never speeding up, never slowing down. Every time I touched the brakes, the chains would jangle louder, like it was warning me not to get too close. I kept thinking it was going to tip. The logs swayed dangerously with each turn, and a few of the chains looked ready to give. I had no cell service, no way to call for help, just the hum of my own engine and the metallic clatter of those dragging chains. When I finally saw a small shoulder, I thought about stopping, letting it go ahead, disappearing into whatever logging site it was headed for. But the second I even eased onto the brake, the trailer jerked. It reversed. Uphill. I'm not making that up. It rolled back a few feet, slow and deliberate, as if it was checking if I was still behind it. I froze, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went pale. Then it started moving forward again, slower this time, chains singing louder, louder, until it felt like they were wrapping around my spine. I knew I had to pass it. I didn't care how dangerous the road was anymore. I couldn't stay behind that thing, not another mile. The next bend opened just wide enough, and I floored it. Tires spat gravel, and for a terrifying second, I thought I was going to clip the logs, but I cleared it, barely, and pulled ahead. My headlights caught the edge of a road sign, Old Quarry Fork, dead end. I knew that place. The quarry had been abandoned since the 70s after a rock slide took out a crew. No one went out that way anymore. But when I looked in the rear view, the trailer was gone. No taillights, no silhouette. Just fog and tree shadows dancing across the cracked pavement. I pulled over, got out. I walked back a few yards with a flashlight and listened. Nothing, not even the sound of birds, just the wind moving through branches that didn't seem to bend. I made it to the bottom of the mountain shaking. My palms are still sticky on the steering wheel. I stopped at a gas station just outside Boone and asked the old guy behind the counter if there'd been any log runs that night up the mountain. He shook his head slowly, said that road hadn't been used for hauling since they closed the mill in '98. Too dangerous, too many accidents. One guy, he told me, swore he saw a truck roll itself off the cliff during a whiteout back in '02, nobody driving. They never found the logs, just broken chains and a long scrape in the dirt. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't get the sound of those chains out of my ears. Couldn't stop replaying the way it reversed, like it knew I was there, like it was watching. The next day, I went back, in daylight with a friend and a second truck behind me. We followed the same path, inch by inch, looking for signs, fresh tracks, broken bark, oil stains, nothing. But near the fork to the quarry, I found something wedged in the brush, a chain, still warm to the touch, still rattling slightly like something had just passed through. We didn't speak the rest of the way home. I don't take those roads anymore. And when I hear chains dragging in the woods behind my house, usually late at night when the fog settles in, I don't go looking. I don't ask questions. Some loads never made it to their destination. Some trailers keep rolling, and some roads, they remember. Story 5, 3:07 a.m. on Switchback Ridge. It was the third night into a long-haul drive, contract gig, hauling HVAC equipment from Asheville down toward Wytheville. Most guys would have waited out the night at a motel, but I've always preferred driving at night. Roads are quieter, air's colder. Something about the stillness calms me. But that night, something about the air on Switchback Ridge felt off before I ever saw a thing. Do you ever get that sense that the land around you remembers more than you do? That it's watching quietly, like it's waiting for you to make a wrong move? That was how it felt when I climbed up the ridge under a thin moon and a sky with no stars. I was about 30 minutes into the forest road, no streetlights, no signs, not even those old green mile markers. Just curve after curve of blacktop that looked like it had been poured decades ago and forgotten since. Gravel snapped under the tires, and my headlights lit up the fog that had started pooling in the low bends like it had crept out of the woods just for me. The clock on the dash said 3:06. I remember that clearly. I just looked at it, wondering if I could make it to the state line by dawn. Then the radio popped on. I hadn't touched it, I wasn't even sure it worked, just clicked on dial already set somewhere between stations. Static hissed, then it began to pulse. Not music, not a voice, just clicking, rhythmic, like someone tapping a mic underwater. Then came the whispering, low at first, like someone speaking through thick plastic. I turned the volume down, but it got louder. Not in the speaker, inside the cab, like it was circling me. Then everything died. Headlights blinked out. The engine cut off mid-breath. The dashboard went dark. No battery light, no oil light. Just the kind of silence that makes you feel suddenly alone in the world. I sat there with my hands still on the wheel, unsure if I was awake. Then I turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. I stepped out of the truck, instinct more than logic. The fog had thickened, and the air felt colder than it should have in late fall. My boots crunched on the gravel, but it was the wrong kind of sound. Muffled, like the rocks didn't want to echo. I looked behind me, just to see if maybe a car would show up. But the road, it wasn't there. What I mean is, the road I'd just driven up, gone. Replaced with a solid wall of trees. No tire tracks, no headlights in the distance. Just bramble and root and thick, black trunks that I swear hadn't been there a minute ago. My phone was in my pocket, so I pulled it out for light. The battery was half full, but it wouldn't unlock. Just kept flickering between the lock screen and a black background. Eventually I got the flashlight to stay on, and that's when I saw it. Just at the edge of the beam. Someone standing in the road. Still, barefoot. Hair hanging in strings down their back. Not looking at me, just standing. Pale feet in the gravel. Toes curled slightly inward. I don't know how long I stared, but my heart felt like it was going to punch through my chest. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to breathe too loud. I had no idea how long they'd been standing there. I took one step back toward the truck, and the person flinched. Not toward me. Just twitched like a puppet. But still didn't turn. I could hear the wind now, just barely, and in it, something else. The sound of branches cracking far off, in sequence, like footsteps that weren't quite human. I backed up faster, opened the door and slid into the cab without taking my eyes off that figure. I locked the doors, as if that would matter, sat in the dark and waited for something to happen. But the figure never moved, never turned, just stood, facing away. Fog poured across the hood of the truck like water down a slope. Then the engine turned over, all at once. No key movement, no clicking. It just came back on. The radio was off. Dash lights on, headlights cutting through the fog. The clock still read 3:07. I didn't wait. I shifted into drive and floored it. The figure vanished from the lights before the tires even moved. Gone, like smoke. I didn't stop until I saw a gas station with the lights still on, miles out from the ridge. When I looked at my phone again, it had a full signal. But the last photo I'd taken, of the generator earlier that day, was gone. Replaced by a black image with a streak of grey running through it, like fog caught mid-motion. And the timestamp on it? 3:07 a.m. I've gone over that night 100 times in my head. Told myself it was stress, fatigue, some electrical glitch I didn't understand. But I know what I saw, what I felt. That part of the Blue Ridge, Switchback Ridge, has always had a reputation. Folks don't build cabins up there. The rangers don't even patrol it much. Locals say it's not the kind of place you go through. It's a place you end up in when you're not paying attention. I never drive that route anymore. Doesn't matter what GPS says, and I've stopped trusting clocks after midnight, because if it ever hits 3:07 again and I'm on a mountain road, I don't think I'll be lucky enough to make it out twice. Story 6. The detour that didn't exist. I was heading south through eastern Kentucky, just past dusk on a Tuesday in early April. A storm had swept through earlier that afternoon. Nothing too bad, just enough to knock a few limbs down and leave the roads shiny and slick. The sun was low but still warm behind the clouds, and I was trying to make it to Pikeville before dark. I've done that drive more times than I can count, always taking Route 40 near Paintsville. Never had a reason to stray from it. Solid road, decent traffic, decent cell coverage. This time was no different until I saw the sign. Big orange board with "Detour Ahead" stenciled across it in black. 2 blinking lights. It looked new. Fresh placement, maybe just for the week. Nothing unusual. I slowed, followed the arrow right. Gravel under my tires. Another orange sign up the embankment said, "Roadwork, use alt route." I hesitated a second but figured I'd just end up on a loop that joined back with the main highway. Happens all the time around those hills. So I eased onto the side road and let the main drag disappear behind me. The road was tighter than I expected. Gravel mostly, though here and there it shifted to patches of broken pavement. Pines crowded in from both sides, long and thin and damp looking, still dripping from the rain. After about 15 minutes, I passed the first sign, white wooden board stuck into the ground with 2 bent nails. Just said, "Keep driving," in what looked like hand-painted black brush strokes. I didn't think much of it. Probably some locals are trying to be helpful. Then another one. Same look, same words. Keep driving. No turnoffs, no houses, no lights. Not even reflectors on the trees. My cell signal had dropped the moment I turned, but I kept the GPS open. Blank. Just a blue dot floating in a sea of grey nothing. I started to get that sick feeling in my stomach, the kind you get when you realize you don't have a way to call for help if you need it. The road narrowed gradually, almost unnoticeably at first. The brush started scraping the sides of the truck. I pulled my mirrors in. My headlights bounced off tree bark and loose branches, and I kept telling myself it had to connect back. Had to. Maybe it was an old service road. Maybe the detour was laid out longer than usual because of a washout. Another sign, this one was crooked. Keep driving. By then, I wasn't sure if it was advice or a warning. The paint was streaked from the rain. The board itself had mold along the bottom, like it had been there a lot longer than it should have. Then I realized how long I'd been driving, over an hour by my clock. No other cars, no animals, just the scrape of tree limbs on metal and that constant wet, pulpy sound of tires rolling over soft gravel. I tapped the brakes. They squeaked louder than usual. I tried to find a place to turn around, but there was nowhere wide enough without backing into a tree or a drop. So I kept going. Not because I trusted the road, but because I couldn't figure out how to leave it. Finally, I saw the end. The road just stopped. No cul-de-sac, no loop, just mud, tree roots, and a moss-covered boulder right in the middle of the path like nature had slammed the door shut. I sat there for a long time, engine idling. The woods around me were silent. Not quiet, silent. No wind, no birds, no bugs. It was like the whole area was holding its breath. I thought about getting out, checking for a driveway or path I'd missed, but something about the air kept me frozen. It smelled wrong. Wet earth, yes, but under that, a sharp, metallic tang. Like old rust or blood in a bucket. I put the truck in reverse. That's when I saw the sign in my mirror. No turning back. Same white board, same black paint. But this one hadn't been there before. I'd have noticed. It was planted directly in the middle of the path I'd just driven. I stepped out, against every instinct screaming not to, and walked up to it. The brush was untouched. No footprints, no tire tracks. Just that sign and a single set of small indentations in the dirt beside it. Barefoot maybe, but wrong. Toes too long, heels are too narrow. I didn't linger, got back in and reversed slowly. For the next half hour, the signs started popping up again, every few 100 feet. Keep driving, then don't look back. One was freshly painted, wet lines dripping down the board. That's when I started to cry a little. Quietly. Not out of fear exactly. Just that deep, gnawing sense that I'd done something irreversible. That I'd taken the wrong road, and whatever this was, it had noticed. When I finally made it back to where I thought I'd turned off, there was no detour sign, no orange board, no blinking lights. Just the old highway, quiet and dry. I pulled onto it like a man crawling out of a grave. I didn't stop driving until I hit the main town, found a diner, and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could steady my hands enough to go in. The next day, I told a guy at the auto shop what happened, half laughing, like I was trying to convince myself it was just some forgotten forest loop. He looked at me for a long time and said there hadn't been road work out that way since the mid-90s. I looked up the coordinates, tried to find the road. Google Maps showed nothing. The satellite view just showed thick pine. Out of curiosity, I drove out there again 2 days later, in the middle of the afternoon. Found the stretch of Route 40 near where I'd seen the detour. There was no side road, just a slope of rock and trees so dense I couldn't even walk through it without a machete. But I swear to you, there were tracks in the gravel shoulder, like something had pulled out recently, fresh enough to be real, deep enough to match my truck. I don't talk about it much now. Every once in a while I'll dream about it. I'll hear those words. Keep driving, whispered in the back of my mind. And sometimes when I'm on the road late, I'll pass a clearing or a narrow turn and catch sight of something white sticking out from the brush. Could be a board, could be just my imagination. But I don't check. I've learned not all roads are meant to lead somewhere. Some just wait for you to find them. Story 7, she waved me down in the rain. I was heading back from Prestonsburg that night, coming down that 2-lane stretch near Copper Ridge where the trees lean in real close and the road forgets what a straight line looks like. It had been raining hard since sundown, the kind of rain that turns pavement into black glass and makes your wipers work overtime just to keep up. The kind of rain that drowns out every other sound. I had my headlights on high, creeping along around 25, tires just barely gripping the curves. The storm was angry, wind pushing branches sideways, thunder rumbling somewhere too far to sound like thunder anymore, more like something moving deep beneath the hills. I wasn't even 5 minutes past the county marker when I saw her, standing just off the shoulder in the downpour, waving her arms in frantic, jerky arcs. She looked like a scarecrow that had come loose, thin, soaked to the bone, hair stuck flat against her face, dress clinging like old bed sheets. I hit the brakes, slow and careful, trying not to hydroplane, rolled down the passenger window just enough for her to hear me over the rain. "You okay?" I asked. "You need help?" She nodded so fast it looked like her neck might snap, then pointed toward the tree line behind her, the woods rising up into black shapes between the slants of rain. "He's in there," she said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been yelling for hours. "He needs help. Please." I looked where she was pointing, but all I saw was darkness and bramble. No flashlight, no sound, no sign of anyone else. "What happened?" I asked. "Was it a wreck?" She didn't answer, just kept staring at the trees like they were about to spit something out. I could see her shoulders trembling. Not from the cold, not exactly. It was something deeper. The kind of shiver that comes from knowing you're too close to something that shouldn't exist. I unbuckled and stepped out, pulling my coat over my head. The rain hit like needles. "Listen," I said, "let me drive you to town. We'll get the sheriff. They'll send someone out here." "No," she cut in too fast. "They'll be gone by then. He needs help now." Her eyes met mine for the first time, pale, wide, desperate. But there was something off in them, like she was seeing through me instead of at me. I looked back at the woods. Still nothing, not a single sound, not even frogs or wind through the trees. The silence was wrong. I turned back to her. "At least get in the truck. You're soaked." She shook her head. "I can't leave him. Not again." And then, before I could stop her, she backed away, barefoot on the wet gravel, disappearing into the trees without another word. I stood there for a moment, soaked and blinking, not sure if I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I called out. Loud. Once. Twice. Nothing came back. No voice. No rustling. Not even the crunch of twigs. Just rain on leaves and the distant hum of my engine. I walked maybe 10 feet into the woods with my flashlight, but the beam barely cut through the wet air. I didn't see anything. No path. Nobody. No woman. Just the kind of cold that sticks to your bones and the sharp scent of something sour under the rain, like metal and mildew. I didn't go any further, just turned back, climbed into the truck, and locked the doors. I sat there for a while, don't know how long, engine idling, heater blowing steam off the inside of the windows. Eventually I turned the truck around, found the next turnout, and called it in from a gas station 2 towns over. Told the clerk what I'd seen, asked if the sheriff was around. They called him for me. He showed up in 20 minutes, wearing a raincoat too big for his frame and a look that said he didn't want to be bothered. I told him what happened. The girl, the direction she ran, her voice, her face. I gave the best description I could, and when I was done, he just looked at me like he'd already heard it all before. "You said she was barefoot?" he asked slowly. "Yeah." "White dress? Real thin?" "Yeah," he nodded once. I looked out the window toward the hills, then said, "We got a name for her, but it ain't official. Most folks call her the Mulberry Hollow Girl." I didn't say anything. He went on, voice lower. "She died out there in '72. Car accident, her and her boyfriend. Curves gave out in the rain. Hit a tree. He crawled into the woods, bled out from a busted leg. They didn't find his body for weeks. She wandered out onto the road trying to flag someone down. By the time a truck came through, she was already gone. Gone how? I asked. He shrugged. My heart stopped. Exposure, shock, no one knows. I asked if he thought she was still out there, like a ghost. I didn't want to say the word, but it hung between us anyway. He looked tired. All I know is folks see her, mostly when it rains, always around that curve. I didn't argue, didn't ask more, just nodded, thanked him, and left. That was 3 years ago. I've driven that route maybe a dozen times since, but never after dark, and never if the clouds look like they're planning something. And every now and then, I'll think I see someone up ahead in the rain, just a shape, arm raised, face hidden. I don't stop anymore. I still carry that guilt, wondering if I should have done more, wondering if I imagined the whole thing. But then, I remember the way she said it. Not again. And I wonder just how many times she's had to watch him die. Story 8. The second car that followed me. It was past midnight when I left the diner off Route 52, a little pull-off place west of Welch, tucked between the hills and the tug fork. I'd stayed late helping a buddy with some wiring in the back room, and by the time we wrapped up, the rain had turned to mist, and the world felt half drowned in fog. That thick kind, the kind that swallows headlights whole and makes every mile feel like you're driving into a cave. I didn't think much of it, just another quiet, lonely night on the mountain roads, and I've never minded driving alone. About an hour in, I noticed them, headlights behind me, way behind at first, just 2 dim orbs tucked in the fog a good 100 yards off. I thought maybe it was someone else getting off shift or heading home from a mine run, nothing strange about that. But the odd part was how steady it stayed. Every bend, every slowdown, every stretch. I'd expect it to catch up or fall back. It didn't. It just hovered. Same distance, never closing. I changed roads 3 times. I took one of the backstay connectors I usually avoid. Narrow, winding blacktop that locals call the sister road because of how it doubles back on itself like a braid. Still, the headlights followed, never gaining, never falling behind, just mirroring. I started feeling a pit settle in my gut, one of those primal things. No real logic to it, just something in my blood that said, this isn't right. I pulled off at a gravel turnout and killed my lights, watched through the mirror, the car slowed too, parked maybe 30 yards back, still as death, lights on. I waited 5 minutes, 10, didn't move, didn't honk, didn't even flick its brights. I figured maybe I was spooking myself, so I got back on the road. Headed east this time, toward an old church I remembered from my teenage years. It's been closed for decades, shuttered after some scandal with the pastor and a missing child, but the lot's still flat and hidden by trees. I pulled in, cut the engine, and turned the lights off. Total blackness. The only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. I started to feel foolish. Then I saw the shape roll by the lot entrance. No headlights, no taillights, no engine sound. Just the shape of a car gliding slowly across the gravel lip of the entrance, moving too smoothly, too silently, like it wasn't made of parts. I held my breath, crouched low behind the steering wheel. The dome light had gone out, but I still felt exposed, like whoever, or whatever, was in that thing could see me anyway. As it passed, I swear I heard breathing, not from me, not in the cab, but outside, close, like someone exhaling inches from the driver's side window. A slow, shaky breath, wet sounding, too human to be windy, too close to be imagined. I didn't move until dawn. By the time the first light cracked through the trees, I was bone stiff, knees locked from being curled up. I checked a lot. No tracks, no tire marks, just dry gravel and misty morning air. I drove straight to town and didn't speak a word about it for weeks. I've tried to explain it away. Bad nerves, exhaustion, maybe someone is messing with me, but no one's ever come forward. No one ever drives that road that late, especially not without lights. I've gone back a few times during the day, sat in that church lot with the engine running, just listening. But I've never stayed past dusk. Sometimes now, late at night, I'll catch headlights in the mirror, and if they stay too steady, too far back, I'll take a turn and never look back. Because I know that if I stop again, I might hear it breathing. Closer this time, maybe right behind me. Story 9. The van that waited at the curve. I used to work a second shift at a paper mill about 20 miles west of town. The drive home wasn't long, but it passed through a stretch of old mountain road that never felt right, even in daylight. They called it Barlow Curve, sharp bend near mile marker 18, right where the old forestry line meets a clearing that's never grown back properly. The guardrails were rusted out, and at night the fog would collect there like a thick puddle, never blowing out like the rest of the ridge. My granddad used to say the curve hung on to things. I never knew what he meant until that week. The first time I saw the van, it was parked just off the gravel shoulder. Plain white, no markings, no windows on the side, just sitting there with the headlights off. But I could hear the engine idling as I drove past. Soft, low rumble, like it had been running a while. I slowed down some, mostly out of curiosity. Couldn't see a driver, couldn't see movement, just there, waiting. I chalked it up to someone lost, or maybe a hunter bedding down for the night. Folks do that sometimes out here, especially in deer season. But it was there again the next night. Same spot, same engine hum, still no lights, still no movement. This time I kept my eyes forward, didn't slow down. The feeling in my gut had changed. Something about it felt deliberate. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the van was probably abandoned. But it kept happening, 4 nights in a row, always in the same place, always just barely visible until I was right on top of it. On the 5th night, I caught a flash of something in the rear view after I passed. The van's brake lights lit up just for a second, enough to let me know whoever was inside had been watching and reacting. I didn't sleep much that night. Started carrying my granddad's old 38 in the glove box after that. The 6th night, it wasn't parked off the road. It was in the middle of it, right at the bend, angled like it had slid sideways and stalled out. No flashes, no sound, just blocking the lane, dead center. I hit the brakes and skidded to a stop maybe 20 yards from it. My headlights lit it up from behind, still no plates, still no markings. I couldn't see inside. Every window looked tinted darker than the factory. I sat there, heart thudding, unsure what to do. The road's too narrow there to go around, and the shoulder drops straight off into a ditch thick with saplings. I put the truck in reverse, eased back up the incline toward the switchback. The whole time, I watched the van. It never moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was crouched just inside the driver's door, staring back. I must have gone half a mile in reverse before I found a turnout and gunned it the other way around the ridge. I didn't get home until close to 3 a.m. That was the last time I ever took Barlow Curve. The next morning, I drove out there in daylight, just to prove to myself it was all in my head. But when I got to the curve, the van was gone. What I did find were drag marks, deep ruts in the gravel and dirt, like something heavy had been pulled from the center of the road into the tree line. The gravel was gouged in 2 perfect tracks, as if the tires had locked up and been shoved sideways. Across the ditch, the barbed wire fence had a clean opening, like someone had cut through it, and the grass on the other side was flattened. Further in, I could see bare footprints in the mud, One set heading in, none coming out. I told a deputy I knew about it later that week. He listened, nodding, not saying much. When I showed him where it happened, he just rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "You're not the first." Then he told me something I still think about. He said folks had been reporting things up there since the 90s. Vehicles parked where they shouldn't be, radios cutting out, animals found mutilated near the curve. But the strange part? Nobody ever sees the van in daylight, only at night, only near that bend. And it always moves when you're not watching. I don't know what it was. A person, a trap, something else. I just know it was waiting, watching. And if I hadn't reversed that night, if I'd gotten out to check, I might have ended up like whatever they dragged through that fence. I haven't taken that road in over a year, but sometimes, when I'm out on late shifts, I'll see headlights behind me in the fog. Not too close, not too far, just steady, matching every turn, every stop, and I never look back.